Good morning. Today is Thursday, July 23rd. Yesterday, I talked about us overcoming timidity. I called on us to take our stand in this divided, truly hate-filled world that we're seeing right now. I was asking for us to equip ourselves with knowledge and faith and conviction and courage. Understand this. Those are demanding, energy-draining steps that will require a lot out of us. So, today I want to talk about the place to go to have your energy bucket filled up. In the 14th chapter of the book of Matthew, we read this: After he had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray, and when it was evening, he was there alone. Jesus had just encountered a crowd that had been described as 5,000 men besides women and children. Now, understand, a certain setting needs to be understood here, that was certainly a male-dominated society, and the number of women and children out in that secluded place probably was not as great as the number of men. But, nevertheless, there could easily have been 6,000 or 8,000 people in that crowd. And it says that Jesus felt compassion for them. This requires us to step back and take a look at what that really means. I don't want it to detract from what is being said there, because it's just a beautiful statement that Jesus he felt compassion for them, and then he figured out a way to show that group of people his compassion. But when it says that he felt compassion for them, it means that the flow of energy was not into him, as if he needed to have his ego stroked or have some kind of affirmation from the people. He was not energized that way. But this flow of energy in him showing compassion was certainly a flow out of him and into them. In the helping professions today, this is called compassion fatigue. The helper wants to truly be of help to people, and the helper is not seeking to be energized by the people he or she is helping. But the reality is that the encounter between those giving compassion and those receiving compassion is very draining. We most often think about getting physically tired from physical activity, and that truly is real. But the exhaustion that comes from pouring out care on people is a whole different kind of fatigue. All of us, as Christians, are called upon to be givers of compassion. But truly, this can be dangerous. If there's not a way of replenishing that drained out energy, we will certainly crash. Sometimes that crash comes in the form of a burnout, where the helper simply gets tired of helping other people. Sometimes that crash comes in the form of a bitterness that develops within the compassion giver, and he or she ends up feeling like no one else understands, and thus all the relationships of that person, often including the marriage relationship, end up suffering because of this compassion fatigue. The point of all this, and the reason I'm saying this, is that if we are to be the people that are going to stand up with our knowledge and faith and conviction and courage, we've got to figure out what it's going to take for our buckets to get refilled. If we don't have our energy buckets refilled, we will lose our effectiveness, and we will damage the lives of those who are around us. And interestingly, Jesus was no exception to this. After the feeding of those thousands, Jesus needed to get away and have his bucket refilled. He needed to receive back the energy that he had been pouring out. I am so grateful that Jesus needed that. By the way he handled that situation, we can also learn how to refill our buckets. Now, note this. Everybody has a bucket. Everybody has a bucket. And when your bucket is filled, you're happy, you're fun to be around, you have enough energy to smile, you're not drained out and unable to help others. You are equipped for whatever comes along because you have that bucket full of energy. But if your bucket is empty, you're not happy. You're not fun to be around. You don't even have the energy to smile. You're drained out, and truly you're unable to help others. And at that moment, you feel like you just can't handle another single thing coming along. Does that sound familiar? Well, of course it does. All of us have been there. All of us have had this energy drain, this compassion fatigue from time to time, and we just get depleted. So, how are we to go about refilling our buckets? Now, first of all, let me say this. Part of the refilling of the bucket is a very personal thing, because what fills your bucket may not fill my bucket. Certainly what fills my bucket may have no appeal to you whatsoever. If I need a bucket refilling, at least one of the things that I know that I can do is I love to be in a quiet place, listening to some good music and having a good cup of coffee. That really goes a long way for me. And also, I want to interject this, that everybody in your family has a bucket that needs to be filled. And if you can help others to have their buckets filled, your whole life is going to be better. I say this again, especially in terms of married relationships, but also with parent-child or child-parent relationships, any kind of relationship. If we help that other person to have a filled up bucket, then it spills over onto us, and life is simply better. But there is another level of this bucket filling that needs to be addressed on a much more important level. And that is, if we want to have our buckets filled, maybe we need to notice what Jesus did to fill his. When we read this passage in that I just read in Matthew 14, and there are other passages as well, it talks about times that Jesus stepped away from the world of needy people. He never stopped loving. He never stopped having compassion for people. But there were times that he even sent the crowds away because he knew that he needed to be refilled. So he got off by himself. He spent time in prayer. He listened to his Father. Sometimes this happened in the evening. Sometimes this happened in the early mornings. But Jesus got off by himself. He went to his mountain to pray. Most of us wish that we had a mountain. Most of us wish that we had some place that we could go. Maybe your ideal place is a mountain, or maybe it's a beach. But the truth is, very few of us have the opportunity to just immediately go to our mountain or go to our beach. In most cases, we are pretty wrapped up in life the way it is. And so we have to go to a more figurative mountain or a more figurative beach. Maybe we just need to get into a quiet room that can be ours for just a few minutes. Now, I understand that this is tough. This is a hard thing to do because it's a challenge for some of us to have any alone time during the day. I say this especially if you have family around, especially if you have little kids. It's hard to have any time at all. But many of us, even without the pressure of family around, we are living by deadlines, or we're living by the expectations that others have on us, and therefore we feel this demanding world come pressing on us all the time. But we still need to have our buckets refilled. This may mean that we have to maybe get up just a few minutes earlier in the morning. Or maybe we need to figure out some way to have just a few minutes in a quiet room by ourselves. Maybe it's, I don't know, for whatever is going to work for you. It doesn't take a long time, but each of us needs to have time to be by ourselves, to pray, and to listen to our Father. Maybe today's equivalent to Jesus going up on the mountain, maybe today's equivalent would include something like turning off all of our electronic devices, or simply going into a room and closing the door. Maybe, I don't know what it is going to be for you, but all of us need to refill our buckets. If we are to be the people who today are ready to stand up with our knowledge and faith and conviction and courage, we've got to be people also with filled up buckets. And so work on that this day. It is certainly a very high priority. Now, if you're still working on filling up your bucket a week from now, something's not working right. We need to find out a way for you to be in contact with the ultimate bucket filler, and that is the very love and compassion of God into our lives. His grace, if you will. But church, now is the time. Let us be equipped, but let us approach this demanding world right now with buckets that are each filled up with the energy that comes to us from God. Bye for today.